Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The international community is racing to get aid into Gaza as the United Nations describes the next few days as being make or break for thousands facing starvation. President Trump has expressed his growing impatience with Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine and reduced the 50-day ultimatum to end the war to a deadline of 10 to 12 days. And England's Lionesses have arrived home following their Euros win. The squad will take part in an open bus parade in central London tomorrow. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Eye leads with President Trump's comment that the starvation in Gaza cannot be faked and that food aid must be allowed to reach civilians there. The Guardian's front page is also looking at Donald Trump's urge to Israel to let food into Gaza to tackle the ongoing crisis there. The Telegraph leads with Mr. Trump urging Sir Keir Starmer to cut taxes and stop cross-channel migrant boats. The US president's visit, citing the pretty simple advice he has for the Prime Minister, is on the front of the Express. The Financial Times, meanwhile, reports that French and German leaders have voiced concerns that the EU's trade deal with the US could harm their economies. Marking the one-year anniversary of the Southport attack, the Liverpool Echo pictures the 3 little girls who lost their lives and the headline, "You'll never be forgotten." The Mirror's front page focuses on the tributes paid at the graduation ceremonies held for Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, 2 students who were stabbed to death in June 2023. Meanwhile, the Metro celebrates the return to home soil of England's victorious Lionesses. And the Daily Star says it is leading calls for coach Serena Wiegman to be made a dame in light of the Lioness victory. Well, victories, really. We're joined tonight by Aubrey Allegretti and Salma Shah. Thank you so much for coming in. It's great to see you. Lots of different stories, but obviously that meeting was going to dominate Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. So lots of angles to it. Let's start with the Eye. Salma, if I can start with you. Yeah. I mean, he really didn't hold back on the situation in Gaza. And considering that some Israeli spokespeople have been saying there is no famine. I mean, the president said, yes, there is.
Yeah, and so this is interesting because we have a different take on each of the fronts. The Eye is fascinating, not least because of the warning to Israel that they're saying Trump has had, but also in terms of what the UK is saying and the idea that actually the UK has been pretty important in terms of moving this position, the fact that they want to remove all barriers possible in order to get food aid in. And also the fact that they're saying that they want to present a UK-led plan. I mean, we're going to go on to The Guardian in a minute that really goes into detail about the differences between Trump and Bibi, but I think the Eye's coverage is important because it really is talking about the UK taking this front position on the situation, despite the fact that actually the UK doesn't seem to have a lot of leverage with Israel or indeed in the Middle East.
OK.
Well, I mean, I suppose what this suggests is really that America's leverage with Israel is also waning. We've seen real splits emerge between the US position with Donald Trump and President Netanyahu in Israel. The Prime Minister, who was basically saying it was a bold-faced lie to claim that there was any sort of starvation that was being caused by Israel. The US President basically standing up to him and saying that's completely wrong. And it sounds as though there was some discussion in the private meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump about the situation in Gaza and trying to sort of push the US president very, very gently. Keir Starmer seems to have handled this situation relatively well in terms of moving the US into a position on this issue, but also more broadly the issue of Palestine and how to recognise its statehood quite sort of softly. I suppose the question will be whether Labour MPs, including those in the Cabinet, feel as though they're acting quickly enough, given that they think that there are matters of days here, not weeks, and there are already humanitarian organisations claiming that there are dozens of people who've died of hunger in recent weeks already.
Summer, you mentioned the difference between the headlines. Let's look at The Guardian, then the front page there. Trump urges Israel to let food aid into Gaza to tackle real starvation. Highlight what the differences that you saw were.
Well, in terms of what The Guardian is reporting, it goes into a lot of detail comparing what Trump has said and what Netanyahu has said. And it ends with this really interesting quote from President Trump, which is, I told Israel, I told Bibi, you have to now maybe do it a different way, he said. And I think that's incredible, given that the US delegation walked out of a meeting on a ceasefire claiming that Hamas is not going to engage. So either the president hasn't really been paying attention to what's been happening, or, as Aubrey says, there has been a little bit of a gentle push by the UK. If that's the case, then Keir Starmer can take a lot of pride in that he has been able to influence some of that decision. But I think it's really stark. I would just say we have to be careful that we don't read a much more sort of strategic schism between the White House and Israel, because it's not necessary that over this issue they may have a difference of opinion, that would change anything more strategic or fundamental about their relationship.
Before we move on to some of the advice that Donald Trump gave Keir Starmer when it comes to domestic politics, just in general, watching the meeting between the two men, how did you feel it went, and how much influence did you get the sense Keir Starmer might have over Trump, if that's the right word to use?
I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but I mean, I've been to some Donald Trump press conferences before, and you know, I was glad it only lasted 70 minutes, because I've been there where it's lasted over an hour and a half, bordering on 2 hours, and you're kind of wondering in which direction it's going to go. I think Keir Starmer was relatively lucky. He came out of the sort of what's known as a sort of pool spray. It's normally meant to last about 5 minutes, but this time it ended up taking over an hour, relatively unscathed. You know, Donald Trump was very complimentary about him, even when there were moments of potential friction, talking about Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, who Donald Trump's derided virulently in the past. Keir Starmer came back and said he's my friend, and it didn't seem to sort of cause either of them to rub each other up the wrong way. But I think more broadly, moving into the next few days, we are seeing a sort of realignment amongst some figures on the right to do with Israel's position. You know, we've talked about Trump, but I think it's also worth noting people like Nigel Farage in a press conference today were saying Netanyahu is very, very good at losing friends. You have people like the sort of MAGA figure, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's also come out and said that America is being too supportive of Israel. So I think, you know, lots of figures on the right and who have been very supportive of Donald Trump in the last few days are shifting their position as well.
OK. Samuel, let's just look at some of the domestic angles. Just mentioned Farage, and that is the headline in some of the papers there. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph. Which is the advice. Cut taxes and stop the boats. There you go. Pithy, simple, to the point.
So, there are two things that I find fascinating about this, and the Telegraph has a lot of the detail that we've just heard, you know, about him criticising Sadiq Khan and saying how terrible it is, and we've already heard him saying... A nasty man, his favourite insult. And we've already heard him sort of criticising wind turbines, etc. So this I find funny for two reasons. One, cut taxes and stop the boats, you know, as if nobody's tried, or as if nobody believes that should be the case, as if it's that easy to deliver. But also, very unprecedented for someone to come onto foreign soil and criticise the regime of the day or offer that kind of advice publicly. I mean, we already know that Trump doesn't really respond or respect the rules of international diplomacy and relationships, but I did find that quite amusing that he just sort of blustered onto here and decided that he was going to give us all, you know, a piece of his mind.
A little lesson in politics. So he didn't have kind words for Sadiq Khan, but he sort of put Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage almost on like the same, you know, level playing field, saying that they're both, what, great men? What was the phrase he used?
Yeah, so Donald Trump was saying, you know, politics is pretty simple. I assume there's a thing going on between you and Nigel, and it's OK, it's just two parties. So he was quite sort of supportive of both of them. Although notably, Nigel Farage wasn't up in Scotland as well. We had this sort of coterie of world leaders and some of Nigel Farage's sort of close friends and allies. Andy Wigmore, who's one of the people that supported him during the Brexit campaign, was there. Nigel Farage was in London giving a press conference instead, which I was attending. And Donald Trump was... Nigel Farage was effectively saying, you know, I'm the real leader of the opposition now. So, you know, he can't have the same relationship with me because diplomatically it's difficult. I'm not quite so sure I buy that because, again, when it comes to diplomacy, as you were just saying, Donald Trump doesn't play by the rules. If you wanted to see Nigel Farage, I sort of feel confident that he could have.
And
if he
Farage
wanted
said
to.
that Starmer is lucky, isn't that the word he used? That he's lucky that Trump seems to like him, basically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. He was basically saying, you know, he's inherited all the sort of benefits of Brexit in the aftermath, and, you know, so he's lucky that he's the sort of Prime Minister that's there to welcome Donald Trump. But, yeah, relatively good relations between the two of them, although, yes, the sort of advice is not exactly sort of groundbreaking. But interesting, I suppose, that they've elevated Nigel Farage to that platform. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party, also leader of the opposition in Parliament. She didn't get a mention or a showing whatsoever, so...
But she will get to see Trump when he comes over for the state visit because she is the official leader of the opposition.
Yeah, he has to see her.
He has to see her, so she is going to have to be able to use that position and leverage it as much as possible if she is going to get over the hump of these personal relationships. I must say, though, for someone who just came over to open a golf course, he seems to have had quite a busy holiday.
Yeah, he does more on his holidays than I do on mine.
We're all waiting for the state visit now, so we'll see how that pans out.
This again.
Let's take a look at a completely different story, front page in the Financial Times, and that is the trade deal between the EU and the US, struck over the past couple of days, around 15% on most things. But France and Germany very much not happy. A lot of Europeans actually not happy with the deal, saying it amounts to capitulation.
Yes, and this is interesting because, of course, the EU bloc, and I have personal, horrible, triggering experiences of negotiating with the EU bloc back in the days of Brexit being brand spanking new. The EU Commission tends to control a lot of the information flow. And if Ursula von der Leyen is going out there and saying, we've got this great deal, it's comprehensive, it's wide-ranging, isn't this the greatest thing ever? But you have presidents and chancellors of member states actually coming out and criticising it. That's actually quite a significant break.
I mean, not just any member state. I mean, France and Germany are the
big
powerhouses.
Ones. Yeah, so I think this is quite interesting in the way that even within the European Commission, where there is usual alignment and, you know, you cannot put a piece of paper between them, there is this really obvious difficulty in terms of their relationships. Because you can see it, you know, in the bullets at the top of the FT. It's not just jitters in Paris and Berlin. The currency has dropped. The share prices are falling. So this has massive impact. And if you think about us in the UK context, we have tariffs. We need to renegotiate them for our car makers and our exports on steel. But we're at 10%, and we perhaps, you know, in good time could go down further. But the EU bloc is 15 blanket, and there doesn't seem to be any room to manoeuvre.
Aubrey?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of classic Trump, right? He's basically put them in a situation which was worse off than when he came into office, but better off than he imposed on sort of Liberation Day when he introduced these tariffs in the first place. So he undoubtedly has caused pain for European economies. You've got the leaders of France, Germany, and even, I mean, the Spanish Premier says he supported it without enthusiasm. So, you know, there are clearly people very unhappy about this, and Ursula von der Leyen sort of going to Scotland to strike this trade deal. She sort of seemed to be, again, indulging in the kind of sycophancy that we've seen so many world leaders have to do in order to sort of flog themselves.
That was another slightly awkward news conference.
But don't you think that's odd? It's odd for the president of the EU Commission to go out of the EU to sign something. I mean, you know, as somebody who's done comms before, I think that's a bit of a PR boo-boo.
They're very
Wasn't
precious
it odd,
about
though,
where...
to see Keir Starmer at a golf club as well?
Well, yes, considering he doesn't play golf, but, I mean, you know, one must go and kowtow to the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
Yes, even you have to make a fool out of yourself.
Oh, well.
It might be worth it.
Anyway, over Sam. We're going to have to leave it there. Coming up, back in Westminster, the government is expected to unveil plans to recognise a Palestinian state. We're going to discuss that next.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from the UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down. As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Aubrey Allegretti and Salma Shah. So let's go to the front page of The Telegraph. And the headline there, Starmer prepares to unveil plan for recognising Palestinian state. And of course, this comes a few days after the French, Emmanuel Macron, Aubrey, if we start with you, announced that they will recognise a Palestinian state.
Certainly. So the pressure's been building now for months, but it's really been exacerbated by Emmanuel Macron kind of jumping the gun, going unilaterally alone and saying that Western countries have to recognise Palestine as an individual state. Now, the Telegraph has some details about how many countries already at the UN do this. About 150 of them who are members of the UN already recognise Palestine. And
several Western ones, Ireland, Spain, I think Norway as well, so a lot of European ones as well.
Yeah, there are some of those as well, but obviously the UK, the US, major sort of G7 economies haven't. And so Macron was very much the first in that regard. And so Keir Starmer is supposed to be convening his cabinet tomorrow, sort of drawing them back from summer recess. I mean, most of them are working in their government departments already, but he will be bringing them back round the cabinet table and potentially, we're told, hosting some sort of public moment, which could be a speech or a press conference, in which he will effectively lay out his plan for formally recognising Palestine as a separate state. We don't know any of the details about that yet. We're sort of light on those. But it's expected that at the UN next month in September, that's the real crunch point where Britain is going to have to decide whose side it's on and whether it's going to stand with France or sort of keep, hovering on the fence, trying to placate the US.
Yeah, what do you make of this move, Salma?
There are some fascinating details in the Telegraph story, not least that, the Americans in the form of Marco Rubio has criticised this and called this Hamas propaganda that's sort of essentially taken over Western leaders. To the immediate, he can't announce, the Prime Minister cannot announce the recognition of the Palestinian state without stating some kind of conditionality, because there is always going to be difficulty around the security of the Israeli state if Palestine does not recognise Israel's right to exist, and indeed if the hostages aren't released that are still in Gaza at this present time. So there is a lot riding on the recognition of Palestinian state, a lot of conditions. The other thing that I find interesting about this is that they're talking about this being some kind of public moment in a speech. I'm not sure that that is sensible for him to do. Yes, he is, on the world stage, on the international stage. There is a question that even though people are absolutely horrified by what's coming down the track, there'll be lots of people who will wonder whether this is actually going to help the immediate situation of people starving in Gaza. And secondly, how much actually the UK needs to contribute to this when there is so much else going wrong at home. Now, I'm happy for the Prime Minister to do that. I'm not sure everybody out there will want their Prime Minister to make a big, bold statement and do it in a way that becomes a national moment.
Yeah, well, which is what some insiders are saying. Well, we'll see what happens, if and when the announcement comes. Let's now go to the Echo. There, very poignant picture. You'll never be forgotten. B.B. King, Elsie Stancombe and Elise De Silva Aguiar, of course, the three little girls that were murdered in Southport. It's the anniversary, Aubrey.
It certainly is, and so obviously tributes have been paid to the three young girls who were killed. There have been some really harrowing details emerging over the last few weeks during the inquests into how this happened. Some of the fantastically brave stories from the teacher who was leading the dance class. But ultimately, it's still a sort of image that haunts Liverpool, and so they will be remembering these three girls and trying probably to forget the killer, because it ultimately it's about the victims and their memories and the sort of things that are being done in their name that people will want to remember. There is obviously a sort of painful, more pertinent reason that this is being remembered this year, because there is sort of protests. We've had concerns about a summer of discontent that were raised at the final cabinet before MPs broke up for the summer recess, and so there is concern that some of that frustration is still being fermented. And I suppose, ministers are keeping a very close eye on it. I'm told that they've got kind of cross-government working groups that are already set up so that they can respond much more quickly if situation escalates, which thankfully so far it hasn't. The situation in Epping has been counter-protests and protests, but I think only 3 arrests over the weekend, so relatively contained.
Salma?
The only thing that I can add to that, I think Aubrey's covered that incredibly well, is that it's really important that we have this front on the Liverpool Echo, a regional paper. Whilst the world gazes elsewhere, I think this is really sort of marks out why local news is so important, because people in the area will be feeling that this loss, particularly at this time.
Absolutely. OK, let's finish on it's quite a gear change, but a lighter note, and that's the Lionesses. Let's start with the Metro. It's come home again. Let's also pull up the front page of the Daily Star, which says, beautiful dame. And this is about giving the coach, Serena Wiegman, a damehood. What have you guys made of the victory?
I mean, it's been incredible. I loved watching the scenes of particularly young girls at Southend Airport welcoming the team back to the UK. And obviously, one of the first things they've done is go into Downing Street, where we've had these fantastic sort of celebratory scenes. Yeah. Luckily, it seems that everyone has managed to avoid doing an Andrew Flintoff. People might remember in 2005, he got a little bit too drunk and maybe made a fool of himself, but everyone was incredibly well behaved. There are now sort of obvious calls for Serena Wiegman to be given an honour.
Salma, 20 seconds.
Listen, I don't really watch football, but I do like winning, so this is great. She should definitely get an honorary damehood.
Yeah. And, I saw a little boy walking around in my neighbourhood today, and he was wearing one of the, the sort of the official tops, which is quite,
It's
interesting.
all about
Shouldn't have been surprising, maybe.
No,
but
it's all about the sponsorship. Winners get sponsorship, and this is great for the women's game.
Aubrey, Salma, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next hour. Now let's take a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There'll be some heavy showers or longer spells of rain this week, but it will be fairly benign overall. Eastern Britain will have a mostly fine start tomorrow, but it will be largely overcast elsewhere with outbreaks of rain or drizzle, locally heavy over Wales and Western England. Ireland and the west of the UK will remain mostly cloudy and damp through the morning, but heavy rain will hit the southwest.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
It's 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview, our top story. A make or break moment for Gaza. As the UN issues a fresh warning, Sky News goes on board a Jordanian plane dropping aid over the Strip.
This is around 8 tons of aid, and in a lorry you could move around 20 tons by road.
Well, the wars in Gaza and Ukraine on the agenda as Keir Starmer meets Donald Trump, with the US president losing patience with Vladimir Putin.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting.
Downing Street is the first stop on the Lionesses' homecoming tour as they show off their championship trophy. Plus, over the next hour, we'll be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Aubrey Allegretti and Salma Shah. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Good evening. The international community is racing to get aid into Gaza, as the United Nations describes the next few days as being make or break for thousands facing starvation. 14 people died of famine and malnourishment in the past 24 hours. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Today, the U.S. president issued a direct message to the Israeli government: the war must end. Well, over the next hour, we'll bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages, and the views of our paper reviewers, the Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and the former Conservative special advisor, Salma Shah. But first, Sky News was on board a Jordanian military plane as 17 tons of food and supplies was airdropped over the Gaza Strip, as Sally Lockwood now reports.
We're on our way to Gaza with the Jordanian military. As we get closer, it gets more tense. The parachutes prepared to drop food and baby formula from the sky. The crew making every effort to unload in an unpopulated area.
To give you an idea of the effort involved, this is around 8 tons of aid. And in a lorry, you could move around 20 tons by road.
Dropping food from the sky is a deeply flawed and undignified way to feed people. But the need in Gaza is so urgent, the Jordanian crew say it's simply an attempt to do something. Then it's a rush on the ground to get to it. And it's become a lethal fight. Our Palestinian sources say gangs have been controlling the aid, punching, even stabbing people to get to it. And most critically, it's not getting to those who are starving.
I came only for my son. I wouldn't come here if it was just for me. When you have a child, he needs bread. I'm an engineer. The aid came from the sky, and we have to run after it. I've never had to do this, never in my life. Either you are shot trying to get food, or you're killed in the conflict.
We are asking for the borders to be opened and for the aid to come in. We are asking all the nations. I'm just trying to get some flour or pasta. I couldn't get anything.
What could really make a difference is an influx of aid by road. It's hoped Israel's humanitarian pauses will rapidly increase food distribution, but it's very unclear how this is going. Gaza's hospitals have reported another 14 deaths from starvation in the last 24 hours, and airstrikes have killed another 41 people, according to local media. We can't verify these numbers because Israel has not allowed international journalists access to Gaza. We were even told filming shots of Gaza from the air could result in these aid flights being cancelled.
Anything left standing is damaged. It's just fields and fields of grey ash. Just devastation.
We may not have access to Gaza, but the world is watching. The question now is what more the international community will do about it. Sally Lockwood, Sky News over Gaza.
Well, let's see how tomorrow's papers are reacting to developments from the Middle East. Well, the Guardian's front page looks at Donald Trump's urge to Israel to let food into Gaza to tackle the ongoing crisis. The Financial Times reports on Trump's promises for more aid as he acknowledges the real starvation in Gaza. And the Telegraph reports that the Prime Minister is preparing to unveil plans for recognising the Palestinian state. Let's get the thoughts of our guests, Aubrey Allegretti and Salma Shah. Salma, let me start with you. I mean, we're just mentioning there in the Telegraph, the Prime Minister, preparing to unveil plans for possibly recognising a Palestinian state. I mean, that's the politics. That's going to take a long time anyway, whereas the crisis is now. And the question is, what can be done?
Yeah, indeed. And, the indignity of people having to run for those food parcels when that is the only way to go, it just shows you the urgency of this situation. There are children in Gaza today that do not have a week. They have hours at best. So whilst recognising the Palestinian state may be a point that applies some pressure to Israel, if those aid corridors are not opened, we are basically looking at mass starvation for a lot of people in Gaza. So I don't think anybody can really appreciate or underappreciate the urgency of the situation.
Yeah, and Sally Lockwood just ended her report saying, the point is what the international community can actually do at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you could get almost two more distinct versions of the story. The pictures of watching those sort of aid parcels being parachuted out of the planes, and then a completely different sort of setting in Scotland with the two leaders, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, sitting down to talk about it. I mean, Donald Trump, for what it's worth, has been using a bit more his influence, his leverage over Israel. He's been challenging Netanyahu, saying that there is a real starvation in the region, despite Netanyahu's insistence that it's a bold-faced lie to claim that Israel is causing that hunger. But we heard in the report that the most important thing is to reopen those aid corridors to allow trucks to get in, which allows the distribution of that food to take place in a better way, in a way that means that people, not just the strongest person is able to muscle their way to the front of the queue, but also means that aid is distributed in a much more timely manner to people who are clearly have hours and days, not weeks.
Yeah, because that's the whole point. I mean, it's such an impractical and dangerous way of distributing aid, because you're not really distributing it, and a lot of the weakest people are not going to be able to basically push their way through to get whatever is dropping from the sky.
But it's also incredibly unfair. I mean, the criticism always was by Israel that certain humanitarian agencies could not be trusted to distribute aid because of the way that Hamas could be taking it, misusing it, reselling it at inflated prices for profit. And therefore, IDF-led aid agencies were distributing this aid where people have been shot, children have been killed, and that seems to be ceasing its distribution and asking people to come to those centres. So there is no fairness. There doesn't seem to be a stable or consistent way of distributing this. And as much as the Jordanians are trying to do their best, this is not going to stop a dangerous situation from getting worse.
It's easy often to think, well, unless the US does something, nothing's going to change. But it's when pictures started coming out of Gaza, and they've been horrific, for the nearly 2 years of this war, but especially in the past week, 10 days, that actually public opinion, not just in the UK, but across the West, seems to have revolted against what they were seeing. Do you think that actually has made a massive difference?
Certainly. I mean, we are reaching a tipping point whereby even it seems impossible for Israel's most ardent allies to ignore. We've mentioned before, I mean, Donald Trump's obviously putting significant pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, but Nigel Farage in his press conference today was saying Benjamin Netanyahu is very, very good at making enemies. And he was speaking from a position of wanting to support Israel. He was saying, we shouldn't rush to recognise a Palestinian state straight away. Then you have other figures associated with the MAGA movement in the US. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a congressperson who's famously very close to Trump, really sort of pushed him into some of his most fringe right-wing views and opinions. And yet even she is saying that the scenes, that the pictures that we're seeing cannot be ignored any longer.
OK.
I was just going to say, the other thing on this point about using our leverage in the West, we also need to understand what's happening closer